All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Jade builds video. So, obviously, Jade brand new. You should have all already done the quest by now. So, let's talk about Jade and whether or not she's actually good. Of note, first, we have the shards that I have included in Jade. I have 3 Tau Strength shards and 2 Tau Duration shards. There's some variance to this, and you can do some other things, and she doesn't need any of these, but they are all very nice. And for the build, we have this. So the immediate most notable thing is that she has 2 aura slots, which makes her incredibly easy to build. You can see I am way over on capacity due to some testing that we've done with other mods and things. So we are not going to have a hard time building Jade. She's going to have a very, very usable build, just no matter what. And it also looks a little weird because you're looking at Boreal's Hatred and also Aviator and Aerodynamic being used for, at least for these two, maybe the first time ever. And otherwise, things are relatively normal. The main note I want to make on this build is that Precision Intensify is currently being used in here, and I think I am sold on using this when I have the Tau shards installed. If I don't have the Tau Strength installed for the extra 45%, I actually think I rather prefer this for the extra strength both on her 3 and on her 2. And, you know, on her 1 doesn't really matter, but I think that the spread of strength is better whenever you don't have the Tau investment in her. But whenever you do, getting to that 200% strength threshold so that her defense reduction a second is at least 20%, so that looking at any enemy for 5 seconds removes all their defenses, I think is pretty good. Other thing to note, I do not have any subsumes on her. The subsume slot, essentially, on Jade is her 3. It can be Roar, Nourish, like a million different things that this can be. There's a lot of choices to be made with it, but I like Ophenemize. I think that this is pretty good. It's a slow, like, in the direction you're looking, it drains, and, like, it doesn't cost very much energy, and it lasts for a long time. Just a generally efficient skill that I think works very well. But if you don't use this, like, you're missing out on the least from her kit by not using this. So if you want to put something else on here to, like, you know, get much more damage, because I will say that Roar is probably just straight up more damage than this, even though this is an armor strip now, which is changed because of the new damage changes. This is the slot to remove. Otherwise, we're using Archon Vitality, and that's factored into the Exalted Weapon that comes with her Glory on High ability. But this is here because the extra health certainly doesn't hurt, and doubling heat procs is incredibly good with this build. Otherwise, we're using Primed Flow for energy efficiency. I have not needed Energize with her really at all. I've actually gone so far as to think about removing one of the duration shards one of the duration shards, and then including an Energy Max shard, and then taking Primed Flow out so that this could be a different mod. So that's like a possibility that you can mess around with. And then Boreal's Hatred, if you don't have this mod, because it comes from some really annoying content, this has been streamlined for me in the past, which is quite good. Otherwise, she wants duration, she wants strength, she needs about this much range. I wouldn't go less range than this. You could try situations with, like, if you don't use Precision Intensify and you keep on, like, Umbral Intensify, you could maybe condense these into Overextended and make an argument that you could have kind of an open mod slot by going Overextended instead of these 2 mods, but you want at least Augur Reach and Stretch. Otherwise, I feel like you're going to have kind of a bad time, and that's pretty good. And then Brief Respite up here, because I didn't really talk about Brief Respite. This is just more survivability. It's probably just, like, the best overall extra survivability we can get after Aerodynamic for her, because her 4 gives her just True Flight. And that is also, that True Flight, why we are using Aviator, Boreal's Hatred, and Aerodynamic. So, you'll note that Boreal's Hatred does have 2 stacks of its set bonus. That is because we are using the other part of this. We're using Boreal's Contempt for that set bonus for the extra 20%. Regardless, the first 20% is still pretty good, but the additional on top is much, much better. With this setup, her 4 gives her 50% DR max, so you start with 50% DR, and then plus Aviator and Boreal's Hatred at this amount of stacks, and Aerodynamic, which is another 24%. That all adds up to be about 86, 87% damage reduction while you are in the air. That is a really nice amount of damage reduction, and it has done a good job of keeping me alive on the steel path without really any issues, especially when combined with Brief Respite. can Brief Respite be stuff like Growing Power and like Corrosive Projection and all of these other auras? Yes. The one thing that you should not use is Pistol Amp, which some people have suggested. This is terrible. Do not use this. This is absolutely awful. Don't use this one. But otherwise, just generally the ones that are good, like Corrosive Projection, Combat Discipline, if you decide to go like Avenger, all that stuff is usable. Whatever you want to put up here, Aerodynamic is the kind of unique one to her. Thank goodness she has the polarity for it. And then this one is kind of whatever. Otherwise, Arcane Velocity, her exalted part of her 4 is considered to be a secondary weapon, so you can use Arcane Velocity on it. 120% fire rate's really good on weapons that have infinite ammo, and it's really, really easy to trigger, so good stuff. Ult Augmented, 60% more strength is very good. I will say that you can use like Arcane Precision here, and like you can swap Molt Augmented out with some other stuff, but I would definitely suggest for sure using Arcane Velocity here. This one's a little bit more up in the air, but I think the 60% strength is phenomenal, especially because all of the strength that you add onto her works really well with Power of the 7. So this is giving me 50% power strength. At base, it's 25%. But what that means is that you also get some more strength out of any strength that you add. So in terms of building up Molt Augmented, instead of this adding plus 60% strength, because this also increases the power of the 7, you will also get like another like 15%-ish power strength on top of that. So Molt Augmented is more like 75% strength when considered that way, making it a whole lot better. So any strength that you're adding, like that's actually the reason why it's kind of like a toss-up between Precision Intensify and Umbral, is because Umbral is getting to kind of dip into Symphony of Mercy for a bit of bonus strength, which is why it would be so good. In terms of actually playing Jade, you are going to mostly be using Glory. This is the build for Glory. This does use the new mod, Pistol Elementalist, which for those of you that have been doing the event are going to have no problem getting. It's quite common. And then otherwise, you will note that there is no Hornet Strike here. The reason there's no Hornet Strike here is because her 2, Deathbringer, is a Serration type effect, meaning you don't need to include Hornet Strike because you already have that type of damage increase. So it would be not as good to stack that instead of just getting like Anemic Agility, Pistol Elementalist for the extra status, and then like even the status chance on Scorch itself and the higher damage from that is going to generally be more valuable. So all of this combined, we're basically, using the good multi-shot stuff. We're using our crit stuff, like pretty basic. And then fire rate takes precedence over things like Hornet Strike. Similar to how Mesa is built, and then Pistol Elementalist, because this is a pure heat build, is incredibly good. Although if you're using any status pure that is doing damage, that's also going to be a similar increase. So if you changed her to be a gas build or a blast build, for example, though I feel like those don't work as well as just pure heat, that will also work. Notably, her companion, Worm Prime here, we are using a build on this that is going to be buffing her. That is because we're using Tenacious Bonds. This is a 1.2 final crit damage multiplier. And then also we're getting Reinforced Bond here for 60% fire rate. Those are 2 pretty considerable buffs that we're getting from Worm. And then Worm is also, of course, using Guardian and Negate to increase the survivability of Jade, because it's probably the most questionable part of her kit as a whole, is that her survivability can sometimes be a little... but yeah, we're using that just with like the Volclock, though it doesn't matter because we're not using the Volclock for anything but like letting us get Tenacious Bond is essentially really the only thing. So you'll need a Volclock with a crit mod in it, but don't worry about anything that's on it. And then otherwise, we're on Xeneric. You probably don't need to be on Xeneric. It's kind of nice for like the beginning of the mission energy regen. But most of the time, you're probably easily going to be able to get away with Madurai or something else. As for energy economy, even though I'm only at 115% efficiency because of Boreals, is pretty good. So yeah, we also have the Grimoire. This is a thing you can do. I'm not going to use this, but I just wanted to show it because you can. You can use this for like energy generation, but also because her 4 snapshots a strength increase, and her 2 will also snapshot a strength increase. Because this gives you 60%, you also will get the increase on that will go into her 2 for making her 2 an even higher strength number. And you can also then take that increased number and this increased strength for applying to her 4 at the same time. So that's like you know, you kind of like triple dip on like being able to increase your strength, giving you way more power than you would normally have. So that's also definitely a consideration. But yeah, other than that, there's not anything super crazy to go over. The Fenwar is just like a good gun, like good guns in the primary slot. This does have a dexterity arcane on it, because the Fenwar is one of the weapons that like loses the least by kind of losing its arcane, which is just for lesson learned. Lesson learned is a polearm that I made, because this is a polearm only mod. And these are the parts for it if you need them, and it is a like overload weapon for melee influence, is basically the whole thing with it. And that's going to do it for all of the builds and things. Let's show how this actually works. So, you can throw your 1. It is an AoE. This will mark enemies, which will become important. But also, this is just an AoE that will give you a heal, which is actually pretty considerable, you and all of your allies. And it will hurt enemies and mark them. Beyond that, we have her 2, which you can hold to activate. So you get that increased power strength you can see in the bottom right. You can also tap it to swap. Whenever you turn this on, it's just on, and you swap the buffs, as you can see. Well, you can't actually see it. You can see it in the top right, kind of, underneath the gigantic stream timer that we're on. But yeah, you can swap between these buffs just freely whenever you want, so you can just do that. The main thing that's important with being able to swap these is you usually should start on the strength increase, and then use your 4, and then you will swap to your weapon damage increase, which affects your 4. So you'll start on this, and then you will use this while your 4 is still going. You just use the strength to buff the initial cast of your 4. This part, the shield effectiveness, regenning your shields a whole bunch, is fine, but generally not particularly useful. You can use it during like downtime to regenerate your squad's entire shields and give them a bunch of overshields, and that's all right. But most of the time, you're just going to be on your weapon buff, because like with the survivability that we have built into her kit right now, with like the boreals and the flying and everything like that, you're going to be more than fine. Her 3 is Ophanim Eyes. This is it's a bunch of eyes that are actually a flashlight, and if you point the flashlight at enemies, they lose all their defenses, and they also get slowed periodically, and they also take damage. It's pretty good. Like I said, this is her like helmetable off ability, but it's quite nice. Then her 4, where you just fly. So notable thing about her flight, it's different. This is axis flight, so you can fly WASD, just moving all over, aiming all over, doing whatever you want to do. And then you have to press jump to go up and crouch to go down. So you will have to like modify this that way to like fly through areas and things. You can also dodge while you are in this. So if you need to like get out of Malice's bubble or something like that, you can do that even while you're still in her 4. And then while in her 4, she has her primary fire, which is just like heat laser, essentially. Bombardment. This is AoE, which is good. And then besides that, you do have an alt fire, which I can't use right now, but we'll show on some enemies, that causes all marked enemies to explode. And the interesting thing about that is that if there are multiple Jade in a party, it does actually work between them. So if another Jade has marked enemies, you will actually be able to blow them up, even if you weren't the one that marked them. So to start here, we have like our usual Orokin battle group. These are the resistances of these guys. These are the new resistances, so they're vulnerable to puncture and viral, and they're resistant to radiation. So these are totally neutral enemies for the purposes of like showing off damage here, because we're of course just going to be using heat. And then to show like the little like rotation that we do, you do power of the 7, usually activate your 3, throw your 4 on, swap to weapon damage, and then blast them. You can see that the primary fire of this also gives those little gold markers. Those markers are what your 1 does, but the primary fire has a chance to proc it, and the high fire rate means that that's usually going to happen every time. Also notable, killing enemies, or when enemies die that are marked, you will get more time on your buff, so it's really rare that you actually have to refresh it, though you might refresh it just because the animation is really cool and the sound effects are great. So there's also that to note. To show off the actual 1+4 little combination, you can throw her 1 while in this, and then blow it up. Which is pretty good. It's especially good whenever it procs heat, but it's quite nice. Obviously, this is causing all the enemies to explode, so each enemy is doing damage to each enemy. So having a grouping ability would be good, which is why some people are using things like Pull or Larva or other grouping tools like that instead of her 3 to make that effect better. But it's really strong whenever you have a group of dudes, or if you just want to take a doorway and make it so that enemies get marked whenever they run through it. So that's pretty much what's up. Of note, for the test that we are going to be doing, we are going to be going to the Kuva Fortress. The new stats and the way elements work mean that every single enemy in the Kuva Fortress takes 50% damage from heat. And all of the damage coming out of this Warframe is heat. So I am still going to do that test because it's what I've been doing, and she's also still good enough to do it, even losing half of her total damage. So we're going to show it in super extra mega hard mode, which should be a good time. But yeah, we're going to jump over to the test. All right, here we go on Tav. Yeah, like I said, this mission, all the Kuva enemies, not the Acolyte, but all the Kuva enemies have 50% heat resistance. So keep that in mind. Very, very important to note. We'll give ourselves a little energy here. Oh, a thing I did not mention in the builds portion is that her her 4's alt fire does have a pretty significant energy cost. So you can't just use it crazy a lot with this build. You'd have to build more efficiency, but you know, as you can see, maybe you don't need to use it a lot. Oh, that door's actually locked, broken. I could just do this all day. Oh, this is actually a super busted map setup for this. Okay, yeah, this is actually an extremely fortuitous map setup. It would definitely actually be 100% correct to not move forward here and just stay in that spawn room. I'm going to resist the temptation to do that. But yeah, I'm doing half the damage. I'm also re-leveling Glory, which that is, of course, does not change anything. Some marked enemies, just blow them up a little bit. Toss our 3 back on. Yeah, I will resist the temptation to stay in that room, although it would be really good. Yeah, so let's show off some of the explosion here. You can see that pretty big energy drain on it. Xmas getting melted, the usual. For one, also, of course, it would heal me if I was taking any health damage or anything like that. Oh, that actually gives me a good excuse to talk about the thing that you should not do, that I know some people are going to suggest you do, which is running Archon Intensify. Archon Intensify will only give you the strength buff if you have healed health, which means you cannot turn that buff on unless you have taken damage, which means it is a horrifically awful setup in order to be able to consistently use the additional power strength from it. So do not use that unless you're going to run combat discipline, which is fair. Someone mentioned in chat that is the case. If you're going to run combat discipline for Avenger, then sure, you can do it. But otherwise, I would not suggest it. And even then, it's kind of a huge pain. Because then you're doing setup while there are enemies around, which is a nightmare. Usually you want to do setup at the beginning of the mission, and then as infrequently as absolutely possible, and at the beginning of the mission is the worst possible time to proc the Intensify. So I would not suggest using that. It's super inconvenient. Just use Precision Intensify instead. It's literally 30% more strength than even the Archon Intensify is. I granted it's only for your 4, but also that's still so much better than having to deal with all that bullshit. Oop, a little too high. Boom. Yeah, really good. So we're at 3 minutes, got about 300 kills, pretty good. Some of that is the result of the very good setup that we had at the beginning. Generally, what I've been seeing from these builds is that it's a little, 100 less at the end of a 10-minute run. You'll be at 900 every 10 minutes or so. Obviously, with fantastic fortuitous setup. In terms of tiles, that can be made better. But I'm trying not to have this run be kind of decided by that. Yeah, solid survivability. Energy economy, you can see, is a little bit on the questionable side. You definitely could make the call that you don't need as much survivability from the Boreals mod and swap that out for Streamline in the same slot for an extra 15% efficiency. That's like a really, really fair judgment to make. And it's what I did originally, but I wanted to show up the Boreal mods because they're weird. And also, it is literally what I am going to be using, so there's also that. Yeah, you just absolutely laser enemies down. And it's phenomenal. You basically never have to recast your 2. So the energy cost there is, like, not really a thing. Like, the main thing is, with more efficiency, it allows you to be, like, a little bit more bursty with, like, throwing these out. Because, like, these are basically full cost. And then using this on top of that is a little expensive if you're not killing enough enemies to get a refund. So you can't, like, just go whole hog into that just whenever you want, because it will overspend you on energy. But generally speaking, against most enemies, you don't really need to do more than just laser them down with her primary fire, which doesn't cost you really anything, which is really nice. So she has, like, a nice, reasonable energy economy, but you do have to be a little careful, and you do have to recast your 3. I would say the recasting of the 3 is actually, like, another one of those things where, like, it's another one of the reasons why it's the ability to replace. Because, like, it is a good ability, but, like, you know, you weigh the considerations of, like, you could turn this into a heat viral for by, like, equipping, like, Nourish, and doing things like that. So, you know, and Nourish, of course, would completely solve your energy economy from this point. You could probably drop the Boreal mod altogether, maybe even use Blind Rage instead of Transient Fortitude. Like, lots of options there. Acolytes also really don't like this. They do not like to be seen by her 3. They pretty much just cannot move and die. Here's one of the new Jade XMS. Very hard to hit with Jade, actually. Blow all these enemies up. Usually when you see huge groups like that, it's like the perfect opportunity to see to throw out a 1 and, like, actually get some of the interaction there. We're 6 minutes in, about 547, which is pretty usual. Yeah, her damage output is not crazy. I would put it on, like, par with something like Styanax, because she, like, you have to keep in mind that she's providing a very, very good buff to the team. A huge amount of weapon damage is being provided to everyone, so, like, nice little buff there. Plus, of course, she's, like, you know, armor stripping enemies with her 3 and everything, which I stopped doing, whoops. And is able to, like, take down, like, compact groups of enemies pretty well. I will say that I wanted to show her 3 off. It probably, like I said earlier, is just better to use something like Roar or a grouping tool. That probably is just literally superior, but I do think that there's not anything wrong with her 3. I think her 3 is a perfectly reasonable ability that you can, like, just keep on with no, like, it's not going to, like, ruin your build or something. It's not like if you kept, like, Protea's 4 or something like that, which is, like, just dire, because the only reason anyone would ever keep that ability is for, like, one of, like, the augment gimmicks it's been given to try and save it. Which, by the way, no, there will not be a new Protea video that shows her 4 with her 2 augment, because that build, like, is so crunchy and inconvenient and just not very fun. It does work, but it works because you're Protea, and not because it's, like, the new thing that's better to do on Protea. Also, hotfix is happening. Perfect time for a hotfix that changes the whole build. It better not! It better not change the whole build. That would be so sad. This is. Oh man, can you imagine if it was the nerf Jade hotfix? That would be the nightmare. I'd have to redo everything. No, for real, chat. Tell me if I need to stop this build video. We're 8 minutes in. We're at 700 kills. Worth noting, you can blow up enemies that are through stuff. I think it has soft line of sight, though. Yeah, you have to have seen them with the mark. It's kind of a weird restriction, but it's actually fine. Like, you can see them and then have them not be on screen later. Oh, is this the update that's going to nerf the Jade Eximus beams being like super murder hoses? That's good. Hey, we've dated the video now. It's almost over though anyway. We're waiting for another Acolyte that we can absolutely annihilate. And I've been overspending on energy. We need to get some of that back. Yeah, just like the absolute, just like AC 130 laser beam of it all. Oh, hey. Laser beams. Yeah, for anyone that made it this far into the video and was just like wanting an explanation for the giant timer that's up in the top because it doesn't make any sense that it says 18 fucking days, the streamathon is ongoing, so I will be live for 12 hours a day for the foreseeable future. Foreseeable future being up until I leave to go to TennoCon. And then once I'm back, that shit will start again. We're going to wait for the Acolyte here. That's about, like, 850 kills. Obviously, with me kind of fucking around showing shit off. But certainly not bad, as you can see. And this is, of course, once again, I should mention at the end, all of these enemies that are not the Acolytes only take 50% damage from this ability because it is all heat. And all Kuva enemies now resist heat. Which is why I will not be testing here in the future. But I wanted to show it here because she's actually good enough to power through it. Which I think is very impressive. Violence? That's not good. I don't get to show things off this way. Never mind. You're slowed and can't do shit, idiot. Alright. Let's blow him up. Alright, now let's get out of here for real. I'm not saying my mission. I'll have to be right back. Alright, that's the end of the recording. And, yes, whoever's watching the YouTube video, come watch the stream.